Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Anime Movie Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Joe Welke.
I'm Kat Hamilton.
And today we are discussing, if you can't tell by the Blu-ray that is stationed right here, Blu-ray, we're discussing the classic anime movie, Perfect Blue. The Satoshi Kon, I guess, feature-length debut.
It's his directorial debut.
Oh, really?
Because Magnetic Rose, which we've discussed previously, is a screenwriting credit.
Oh, okay.
Not
okay.
a directing credit.
Well, yeah, then this is his directorial debut and comes out with a bang. This is widely considered like one of the best anime movies ever made, and it's like a classic in the genre.
Well, I think it's on a lot of top lists, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And it's inspired a lot of current directors and artists and stuff like that. We'll talk about that a little bit more, I guess, later on. But when did this come out?
This came out in Japan in 1997.
Okay.
The USA release was in 1999, which, to put that into some sort of context for other animes at the time, Ghost in the Shell would have come out 2 years beforehand.
Okay.
And Princess Mononoke came out the same year in Japan, released same year in the US.
Okay. So this is a little bit older. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's there was a lot of great anime movies that came out.
Yeah, and similar to those two films, there is some CGI, but it's mostly hand-drawn.
Yeah, I was a little, when you brought up that there's a little bit of CGI in this, I was a little confused as to where, because I couldn't tell. Maybe it's like, I think we were talking about it earlier, but I was thinking it's like, maybe it's just like a hallway shot where they kind of just cheaped out or something, walking down a hallway.
Yeah, apparently it's used pretty minimally. I have a feeling it's probably like cars, maybe some buildings.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. I didn't actually look into it.
Okay. So I guess a spoiler-free synopsis, we're in the non-spoiler section here. I guess a spoiler-free synopsis is that this follows the story of Mima, who is a pop star, pop idol in Japan, and she is making a transition into being an actress. So she has to leave her pop star, pop idol life behind, and she leaves the group that she was in, and there's some people questioning her decisions, being like, oh, you were doing so well as a pop idol. Why would you transition to being an actress? And then there's also like a little bit of a stalker situation that she's dealing with and all of this psychological terror that goes along with that. And yeah, I think that's a pretty decent non-spoiler review, like synopsis of what's going on in the movie.
Yeah, that definitely sets it up. Apparently, I've read in a couple of places that she's supposed to be a bee idol.
Okay.
You know, like a bee movie, but the idol version.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, so the name of her idol group is Cham, and I was confused as to how popular Cham is because they're in magazines and like some of their songs later on in the movie are like getting some charting success. But it looks like they're performing in an amusement park during the day. And
yeah, I believe in the beginning of the film, they have not yet charted.
Okay, yeah. But like in the crowd, there's a bunch of photographers that are there, and maybe they're just on the come up and they're a little underground idol sensation at the beginning of the movie. But then, yeah, so I was watching it just like, well, where is this fandom? Why are they so why are they so upset that Mima would leave? But maybe they were just like on the precipice of huge success, and then she was just like, screw it, I'm going to be an actress. And they're like, wait, what? We just had a good thing going.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know how much to get into, even just about the beginning of the film, without starting to spoil some things. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm like hesitant. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't want to say.
Yeah,
some
me
things,
too, because I
like,
was just like, well, we're already talking about it, but. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those classic kind of Satoshi Kon things where it's bending reality and you don't know what's an illusion, what's a dream, what's...
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Satoshi Kon for a second. He sadly died of pancreatic cancer in 2010 at the age of 46. And by that time, he only had 4 films out, I believe. Let's see. We have
Perfect Blue, Paprika, Millennium Actress, and what's the fourth one?
The
Tokyo Godfather.
Yeah, I was like the godparents. Like, I was like struggling. And he had a TV series, which is Paranoia Agent.
Yeah.
And he's known for kind of breaking the boundaries of animation because of how much he does that could be done as live action, and why it is that he does it as animation instead. And it kind of redefined what people thought of as an animated movie. Most of his material is really adult, and he does have this preoccupation with this sort of fine line between reality and fantasy and memory. And there's editing in this film that is so similar to what we would see in live action suspense thrillers. There's jumping around in time. There's showing something that's, supposedly diegetic, and then a moment later we find out that it was actually part of a dream or part of, a parallel story that's going on, which is her acting career and the show that she's starting to have a part in. And that's another thing that Kon does a lot, is these frame stories within side of stories. So in Millennium Actress, we have this concurrent story of this woman's life, whereas the sort of diegetic and in the moment of what's happening now is this interview. In this story, we have this girl's everyday life, this girl's pop idol life, and then we also have the story of her as part of this film. And it kind of bounces in between them. And it doesn't try to guide you in any way to make it clear what sort of time, memory, or space that you're in.
Yeah, and it can get a little confusing, I feel like, but if you're honed in and you're enthralled with the movie, you can kind of figure out what's going on, and it's very interesting. But it's purposefully trying to make you disoriented because you're supposed to be feeling what the main character is feeling and all of her disorientation. So as you're watching the movie, you're just kind of like, I don't really know what's going on. And Mima, a lot of times, doesn't know what's going on. She can't tell reality from a dream or what she's acting in. And she doesn't know what's part of her real life and what isn't. So I think it's just like really well done in forcing that confusion onto you.
Yeah, I think it leaves a lot open for interpretation, which makes it a very interesting film to talk about. But you also really have to know what you're doing as a director in order to confuse the audience in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
It's a really, really tricky, line to kind of deal with. And a lot of the time when you read academic papers about Satoshi Kon's work and about Perfect Blue, it's not compared to other anime. It's not compared to other animation. Normally, it's compared to Hitchcock, and it's compared to David Fincher, and it's compared to all these like live action, like suspense thrillers, because it is very similar. But with animation, you have the most control over the process.
Yes.
And so you really have to mean every little bit that you put in. And to me, this is an essay movie. This is a movie where you could take any scene and you can write an entire essay about it.
Yeah.
And there's so much symbolism and there's so much, thought that goes into each little piece and so many ways that each piece can be interpreted.
Well, it's also interesting because this movie didn't start out as an animated movie. Like we read up on the backstory about it, and it was supposed to be a live action, and then a bunch of the funding got withdrawn before they started filming.
Yeah, based on a novel.
Yeah.
There was a screenplay that's supposed to be live action, but it was unproduced.
But I think that making it an animated movie, like a very adult animated movie that deals with this kind of stuff, it allows you to really play with the world and whatever your imagination. That's why I love animated movies and animated shows, is because there's no limit to the imagination. Like if this was a live action movie, I don't think it would be as good. I know that this movie gets a lot of comparison to Black Swan, the Darren Aronofsky movie, and he even like bought a complete scene from this movie to include in Requiem for a Dream. So he was like super inspired by this, but I think it works so well as an animated movie, and as an anime. And it's just, what's the quote from Satoshi Kon where it was like, I was tired of seeing anime just being pretty girls and robots.
Yeah.
So I think that's what makes this super interesting, is because it's not your typical anime movie. It's a step outside of what you usually would think of as an anime movie.
Yeah, and I think he makes a really strong point about it. I think he's very self-reflexive about it. There's a scene where we see some of Mima's fans, and they're in some kind of like an otaku shop. Maybe it's a hentai shop. We're not sure. But there's this big poster with this anime girl on it with these massive eyes and giant eyelashes. And it's in such stark contrast to the way he designs his own characters, which are much more three-dimensional, much more lifelike and believable. He doesn't have these like chibi moments. He doesn't have really big sparkly eyes or colorful hair or colorful eyes for that matter. And I think that he specifically, put that big poster that's like zoomed in on the eye to begin with, to be like, this isn't what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think it looks so good, and it's grounded in realism. But if this was made into a live action movie, I don't think it would have worked, just because at the time, I don't think the special effects would have been there. And it would have been this really like cheesy CGI.
Yeah, I think it would have been pretty awful. So the screenplay was going to be a theatrical movie, and then it was going to be a straight to video movie, and then it was going to be an animation to video. And it was Katsuhiro Otomo who actually suggested that Satoshi Kon be the director for his directorial debut, who was massively respected because of writing Akira and also being responsible for the Akira film. And Satoshi Kon was his protege, I guess.
His mentee.
Yeah.
His Padawan.
Yeah, exactly. His Padawan, his manga Padawan. One thing that was, I guess, Satoshi Kon wanted to put his own spin on it, especially because of his preoccupation with this like blurring of the line between fantasy and reality. And apparently the original novel isn't really this like mind-bending psychological thriller, and there's a lot of parts that are missing that are in the animation, which Satoshi Kon added. He never read the novel. But
like a true G. Yeah, what's this about? Yeah, I'll do it. Whatever. You want me to? No, I'm not reading it.
And there's multiple sources that say that he was only made to agree to like 2 or 3 main things that he could not change.
Yeah.
And it's literally the most basic points of the plot.
Yeah.
Like it had to involve an idol who was changing careers, and there had to be like
a stalker situation.
A stalker. Yeah, that is it.
Yeah.
That's like
that could be anything.
The bare minimum.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
It's so little. But yeah, I mean, I think the animation is great. I read something about like the original copies of the 35 millimeter of the movie were destroyed. So every version of this that you see presently is from a lower quality copy of the film.
Right.
Which makes sense because there's some really intense jittering on the animation. It's like constantly just shaking just a little bit.
And what's funny is that the Blu-ray for it came out in 2018, and that was the first time it was released on Blu-ray. But you would have thought that they might have gone back through and done a little bit of remastering, which might have taken some of that jittering out. The first few scenes, the animation is pretty bad. And I remember for the first time watching it, I was like, I mean, I know this is 1997, but good Lord. And I think it's just because in the first scene, we see so many characters that we never really see again, or we don't see very much. So it's almost like they put the newbie animators on it or something, or we're just like, let's use as few cells as possible for this. Because when people talk, their shoulders literally like do this. Like later, people actually move the way bodies move, but initially it's like, it's really bizarre. Like they're all on like little popsicle sticks. But yeah, and then it gets a lot more complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this film blends into the animation. A lot of motifs that I think work really well. You see a lot of reflections. I think this film has a lot to do with the gaze of others, and I think it has to do with identity, both to others and self-identity. And so you see a lot of reflection. And I mean, in the opening scene of this film, you start out, both Joe and I, we've seen this movie, and both of us thought for some reason that there was some kind of a trailer for another movie on the top of it, because we did not remember it opening on like off-brand Power Rangers.
Yeah, I've completely forgot about that, and I was just watching it like, is this? I was having a Satoshi Kon moment of just like, is this reality? Like, what? But I completely forgot about the Power Rangers like amusement park, theme park show that was going on before Cham takes the stage.
So like from moment one, you're already slightly confused because it starts out showing like we're in a TV show, and then it pulls out, and then we see that this is a stage show and that there's an audience.
Yeah.
And then we start seeing, this conversation between these fans, and we're getting introduced to the idea that like Mima might be like leaving the group, and that there is this group. And then we see her performing with Cham, and then it cuts to her on a train looking at her reflection. And so there's this slightly disjointed thing where we've already cut between, so many different locations and so many different like moods, where the film is already going, all right, where are we right now?
Yeah.
Are we on the train right now and she's remembering when she was on stage? Or are we on stage and seeing her from yesterday? Like, which one's the memory? And so we already have this, like, which one is she right now? So just like from the start, he's already setting up all of these things that he's going to be showing throughout the entire film.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect way to describe it. Like, especially when you're looking at her on the train, it's like, is she on the way to the show? Is she leaving from the show? Or is this the next day and she's remembering? And it puts you in that state of unease that you're going to be in throughout the rest of the movie. And it just works. I feel like it if it was one step off the track, the whole movie falls apart.
Yeah.
But because it's so tightly woven in the suspense and confusion, it works perfectly. Even if there are times where I'm like, well, was that real? Or was that real? Or what's real? What's going on? It's still just so interesting and fun to try to interpret what's going on and figure out what's real and who's doing what and what's going on and who is who. It's great. And even how does some things happen, which we'll get to in spoilers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the soundtrack.
Actually, I could not tell you anything about the soundtrack. I don't remember it at all.
You don't remember any of Cham's great big hits?
Oh, yeah.
Cham had some bangers.
The last song that she ever played is just like a kind of whispery ballad.
Yeah. There's apparently one song in this that no one has ever been able to identify. It's in this one scene.
Wait, I mean, they can't. It could be Nude, the film.
I mean, I'm saying the song is.
Yeah.
It's in this one specific scene. It wasn't on the soundtrack. It's not listed in the credits, and no one has found it.
Okay.
Like nobody knows what it is or who it's by, or nobody can find a full version of the song. But there is a song playing in this one scene, and as of 2020, I read on IMDb, no one has been able to figure out who did it and what's it called. And I was like, that's really interesting to me. I don't know why.
Total mystery song.
Yeah. But I mean, you're not watching this movie for the soundtrack, I don't think.
No.
But, it didn't take away anything. So, success.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
How amped are you about Perfect Blue?
Yeah. This is such a great movie.
Yeah, I'm very amped. I think we're going to have another agreement episode here.
Yeah, this could be an agreement episode.
Okay, so do you want to get the spoilers?
Yeah, let's do it.
They wouldn't spoil this, right?
Oh,
They
God.
can't spoil this,
Please
right?
don't.
No
Spoiler talk, anime movie podcast, spoiler talk.
So what do you want to spoil first?
I was about to ask you that.
Well, I asked you first, so...
It's weirdly aggressive.
Well, I asked you first. Go.
Okay, so we have a little bit of a taste of what's going to happen based on that first scene, as I mentioned. But in, most horror films, we start out thinking everything's kind of fine.
Yeah.
And then there are these like little hints dropped. They're like just like little hints of horror. And it's just like, oh, that's not right.
Little seed planted.
Yeah. And I think the first one is when we find out about Mima's room.
Yeah. Yeah, Mima's room is this, I guess back then they didn't have a name for it, but it's like a blog about Mima's life. And she's like, wait, what? What's Mima's room?
She didn't write it.
She had no idea that it was going on. And so that's kind of like, oh, okay. And then when she logs in and she's actually reading it, it's all of the details of her life down to which foot she steps off of the train with.
Which brand of milk she buys.
Yeah, which is so
Fish
specific.
food she buys for
Yeah.
her little neon fish.
Well, it's like, I don't even know what brand of milk I buy or like what foot I step off of anything with. But the specificity of the blog is what's really creepy. And she's like reading it at the beginning and she's kind of like, this is funny. This is
Yeah,
great.
she's like, oh my God, they really know me.
Yeah. And then when it gets to the specificity of like, I stepped off the train with my left foot, but I always usually step off with my right, which is why I'm having a bad day today. That's when she starts to be like, wait, what the hell is this? And it's so, I think that most people would have that kind of reaction, especially if you're a pop idol and you do have fans that keep track of, they've read every interview that you've ever done or they've seen you around and they are like your super fans. But then when it gets to those like incredibly minute details where you're like, oh my God, who's doing this? Because it's not me.
And you kind of have to think about the fact that when this was being made, this is kind of the dawn of the internet era.
Yeah.
This is super, super early. And apparently Satoshi Kon was kind of dealing with learning the internet at the time and it becoming a part of life. This whole idea of having this like message board or blog or homepage was not in the novel at all.
Okay.
So this is something that specifically Satoshi Kon brought into this, which is great.
Absolutely.
And super, super creepy. Especially because there's this implication that maybe she's always being watched and like, you can see into her room or somebody's looking into her room. So there's this very like voyeuristic thing. And it sets up this idea that as a pop idol, as a B pop idol, you crave attention, you crave the gaze, and then it's watching that gaze become dangerous and watching it become something that you really don't want. And, I was telling Joe while we were watching it that this is possibly the most unrealistic thing about this film is watching her mentor / manager, who's much older than her, teach her how to use the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, since when has an older person taught a younger person how to use the internet?
Yeah, the explanation is just very, it's so funny to see. And they're using like Netscape browser on it, which was, back then it was like the most popular web browsing tool. And then it just like died a slow, horrible death. But back to what you were saying about, being watched, after she starts to kind of panic about the details that are on Mima's room, she like stands up and then you have her like run to her balcony and it zooms out and she's just kind of like looking around because, maybe there's somebody with a telescope or binoculars that are looking in, and it gives you this thing of she's not safe and she, wants to close her curtains and be like, I don't know who's in my room, which I guess is who's in her life that's doing all of this, but she doesn't feel that sense of privacy in her own room anymore, which I think is so creepy.
Yeah, that shot that you talk about is either a zoom out or like a massive dolly out. Super Hitchcockian.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because you see her in her rear window, get it? And then you have that massive zoom out and you see this whole city, and then you watch her at a distance close the curtains.
Yeah.
And it just has this amazing sense of smallness and vulnerability when you think of this person who should be larger than life,
Yeah.
but is already like feeling trapped in this tiny place.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's an essay scene right there for you. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
absolutely it does it. But yeah, when you're not feeling safe even in your own room, and the name of the blog is Mima's Room. That's such an invasion of privacy that I don't think anybody would want to have in their life, or I don't know if they'd be able to handle it. Like, and that's a really big thing that pop stars and actresses and actors need to deal with, like that invasion of privacy. There's always somebody up your ass. There's always paparazzi, like trying to figure out what you're doing and taking pictures of what you're doing. And that lack of privacy is something that she's having to learn how to deal with as she ascends to, being a famous actress or previously a pop idol. And she's not handling it well.
Yeah. I think that when we talk about the sort of gaze, of course, there's the male gaze of her apparently all male fan base.
Yeah. If you look into the audience of the Cham concert, it's only dudes and then like 500 photographers. It's just like, that was like the first note that I took. I was like, how popular is Cham that they're performing in an amusement park during the day, which not the best gig probably. And then they only perform like 2 songs.
Although they because we kind of cut out and cut back to it, I kind of wonder if it's like implied that they had a full concert. Because they do say like, we just have one more song, which I think would be a weird thing to say after your first song.
Yeah.
I think you just say more like, we're only playing 2 songs today.
Well, also their opener are the Power Rangers.
Sure.
That's how big of an act can you be? But then they're in magazines and they have posters and they have like fans that are actually reading up on them and keeping up with them and seeing how successful they're getting and what Mima's up to now that she's quit Cham, and what the Cham girls are doing now that Mima's gone, and they're keeping tabs on everybody associated with this. So I just didn't really get a sense of like where they're at in their careers until the two, after Mima left, the two are like, we finally charted. And Mima's like, wow, we never charted when I was in the group. And then Mima's kind of getting a bigger and bigger role in this. Was it a TV show or was it a movie?
Yeah, it's a TV show. So it's a serialized show.
Double Bind is the name of the show.
Yeah. Significantly, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nice that they don't harp on this idea of her being like, oh, I left my group and now they're more popular than like they ever have been. Because you could stop down and have her be upset about that. But it's nice just to float it out there and just to imagine that might just be like adding on to some of the pressure she's experiencing. But I think, with that, male gaze of her audience, her fan base, and also with most of her sort of career moves being controlled by men, you get her agent who's gets her the part in Double Bind, this like CSI style serial, and then you also have Shibuya as the screenwriter of the TV show, who's really kind of making decisions about what her character will do next. And I think there's a big question of her agency in this and whether her actions, especially in making this sort of career change, are ultimately empowering, because it does seem to make her really vulnerable. As it starts out, like she's like a little girl, and she when she comes back to her room after she does that last concert with Cham, she pulls, the poster off the wall, and then she talks to her mom on the phone, and her mom's being like, why we pay for all those like singing lessons? This is your dream. You're doing your dream. And she's kind of like, no, Mom.
I have a new dream, Mom. I want to be an actress now. You don't know anything.
So it's this like, teenager, pulling the poster off of the wall and it kind of diverging from the family in order to do their own thing. So that's the first, like, she's, sort of getting wings. But then it seems like, throughout the film, there's more and more that happens that like disturbingly suggests that like being sexually assaulted matures you.
Yeah.
I do think it is kind of trying to like take away her sort of innocence in this like, little girl in this sort of Princess Tower apartment thing going on.
Yeah, I think that like a lot of, child stars and Disney stars, they deal with that where they're trying to be, more mature and taken seriously as actors and actresses. They always get that first mature role or something, or even Daniel Radcliffe from Harry Potter when he did that play where he's naked on stage. Yeah. That's like a big, I'm not Harry Potter anymore.
Yeah.
That's a big, I'm trying to do other things. So maybe she was looking at that. Maybe that's a allegory for that moment in a teen sensation or pop idol's career move where it's like, you're not going to see me as the pop idol. I'm not Cham anymore. I am Mima, whatever her last name is. And and this is my new thing. And I'm going to show you that I'm taking this seriously. And I mean, the screenwriter has like some kind of, it seems like nefarious thing. He wants to like screw over the agent where he's like, let's see how serious she is about it. I'm going to write this like sexual assault rape scene. And the agents are kind of like, I don't know how we feel about this. And Mima's like, no, this is what actors and actresses do. They're acting. And even the agent says something like, Jodie, whatever her name, Jodie Foster, she did it.
Yeah.
And so this is just this is what life's going to be like. But I mean, it doesn't need to be like that. But I could see how Mima, coming from this like very twee pop bubblegummy thing, going out and trying to strike it out on her own path, being like, this is the new direction I'm going. I'm not just like a teeny bopper idol anymore. I'm doing this like seriously. And this is what seriousness does. And then she gets put into situations. And, there's even a scene afterwards when she films it where she's crying on her bed. She's like, of course I didn't want to do that. Like, but this is what you do. And it feels like you were saying, it feels like forced onto her because the screenwriter is doing it. And there's the implication that if she says no, that they're not going to want to work with her anymore. And she'll get labeled as like a difficult actress and she doesn't want to do serious acting because she wants to turn down this thing. So it is a lot of pressure, I feel. And I feel like a lot of actors and actresses that are trying to transition from teeny bopper or kid stuff to more mature things probably feel that pressure.
Yeah. I mean, and there's this general storyline for her biggest fans that her moving away from this singing career into the acting career, it's not just a misstep, like it's a betrayal.
Yeah.
And you can see as she's making these decisions and going further away from her singing career and that sort of like ideal, perfect, pure idea of the innocent girl, that you're starting to see these frightening actions sort of ramp up in response to each step that she takes away from, each step that she takes away from her old career. And we haven't even talked about Memania yet.
Yeah.
There are no attractive men in this film.
I mean, the actor in the TV show seems like he's an attractive dude.
Yeah, I guess.
But he has like such a small role,
Yeah. But most of the dudes in this are like specifically unattractive. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've started to ramble, but basically I kind of wanted to get to the point that, in a Hitchcock movie, you will usually have women be the victim, and there's going to be a handsome man at some point who attracts this woman or misleads her into this like dangerous way of life. But this is a film where it is the men who are continuously showing up murdered.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this female revenge thriller, because we have Rumi, who is this kind of has-been character, this Sunset Boulevard or Magnetic Rose character, because she used to be a pop idol.
Oh, she was? Is that her backstory? Oh, I thought that
Apparently,
she was
yeah.
just like an agent for Mima. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So she used to be a pop idol. And so now she's kind of trying to keep living the idol dream through Mima. And so, of course, when she goes away from this image of who she wants her to be, this starts to set things off for her. And then the crazy stalker fan that she has is also going crazy. And you kind of learn, or you kind of figure out that they have somehow been in cahoots, or maybe that Rumi is telling Mamania what to do.
Yeah, I think that his name is Mamania.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what his real name is, but that's what he calls himself because it's a mix of Mima and Mania.
Okay. Well, I think that he's just a pawn in Rumi's like larger I'm going to fuck over Mima game.
Yeah.
Because once Mima decides that she's going to be an actress, that's when Rumi starts to really lose it. And she thinks that it's a horrible decision and she wants Mima to continue being a pop star. And it's kind of like that situation where a parent like has had a dream and then they're pushing it on their kid. But I don't know why she can't push it on the other two Cham girls. It's just, why is she so fixated on Mima, But anyway, she is. Yeah, I feel like Mamania was manipulated by Rumi because, as we find out, Rumi is the author of Mima's room, and that's how she knows all of these specific details about Mima because she's constantly around her. And she's emailing Mamania through the Mima's room like email account. So he thinks that it's Mima, but it's Rumi. And then I guess like Rumi's dressed up as Mima a couple times, and that's where I kind of get lost in like, how is she pulling this off? Like, how is Mamania tricked by Rumi, who looks nothing like Mima?
Yeah, and there are some interpretations that Mamania is the one writing Mima's room.
See, I was thinking that the first time I watched it, obviously, and then there's the twist that Rumi is actually the stalkery person. But when you're watching the movie now and with the knowledge of knowing that it's Rumi that's like the crazy person, you don't really see Mamania typing anything. He's just reading it in her voice and he's like typing, but he's like typing emails to her. So I think it's a great misdirect.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to believe that he's the guy because, he's gross looking and, that's what a typical stalker person would maybe look like.
Yeah, and it's constant misdirection with him. And, placing him at the first concert and then placing him in a couple of other spots. One of the things that happens in the opening scene is that he gets into a fight with some sort of hooligans who I guess have caused trouble at Cham concerts in the past. And one of the kids has distinctive dreads. And when Mima's going into an elevator at her acting job, she steps into the elevator and there's a little newspaper clipping that's been taped to the side of the elevator. And it's that kid's face with the dreads saying that he was a victim of a hit and run.
Yeah.
And then Mima turns around and looks outside and there's some photographers, but there's also just the creepy dude standing there in the middle of the doorway. And so, these things happen all the time where you go like, oh, he must have put that there. And then when you see him, mouthing some of the words of the blog in his room that's like covered in pictures of her, you think, oh, he's the one who's been like writing Mima's room the whole time.
He's the one that killed anybody that's like slighted her even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I think that like at the beginning, he's working security at the theme park.
Yeah, I read somewhere that he was working security. I didn't get a security vibe, but
I mean, it looked like he kind of had a uniform on at the beginning, but then it doesn't really explain why he keeps showing up around her other than he's stalking her.
yeah.
And then we see his room and it's covered in all of her paraphernalia. So then you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's why this guy keeps showing up. He's not just a security guard. He is, or he's purposely taking security gigs at everything that she's at.
Yeah. So it's really when we see this pretty disturbing and extended rape scene that she's filming as part of Double Bind. That's when things really start to unravel for her, and when things escalate, for the actions of Rumi and therefore also Mimania. But it's one of the first moments of like, is this real or is this not real? Because as soon as she gets home, you see that like the fish are dead in her tank. And then she has just an absolute meltdown.
Yeah. And I think it's just like everything that's been building up for her, all the pressure that she feels because, stepping away from being a pop idol where she was having some success, or they were at least on the kind of the precipice of breaking through, and leaving that and venturing out to be an actress because you think it might be more lucrative or fulfilling, and then having to endure that pretty brutal rape scene, like not just a rape scene, it's like a gang rape scene, and then having to come home and be like, she says, I didn't want to do that, but like I said before, like that's just what is expected of actresses. But I will say, as brutal as that scene was, there was a pretty funny moment where, they cut and the guys, and they're like, we're going to move the cameras. Everybody stay where you are. And the guy that's on top of her, he just goes, hey, I'm really sorry about this. This isn't cool. She's like, no, that's fine. It was like that break in the horribleness that I imagine does go on actual movie sets.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think that was a clever moment to kind of break the tension and remind you that it's a part of a scene.
Yeah. Like this guy's just an actor and he doesn't have any malevolent thing going on.
And what's really great is that they also let it rest for a while before he says that. It's not like immediately. It's like it lets it become awkward
Yeah.
because they're just kind of frozen in place before he says it. And I think that is some much needed comic relief there. But, with her breakdown afterwards, there's this really, interesting idea of like, in a way, she kind of was raped.
Yeah.
Her consent wasn't really respected. Even though it seemed like she kind of had an option, there's a man who's writing this script specifically because he wants to see like a pop star get raped on TV, and putting her and her agent into this position where it's like, well, if you say no, you're damaging your career. So, it's this complex and kind of horrible.
Yeah, it's like a weird coercion type of deal where
Yeah.
it's just like, if you don't do this, the implication is that you're not going to work in this. You're not going to work in this town anymore, kid.
Yeah.
Which is like a bad position to be in. Her career is being like forced into doing something like that.
And at the end of her sort of breakdown scene, you see a couple of the fish swimming around. So it's this moment where you're just like, wait, what the fuck? The fish were dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, did a couple of them survive, or are the fish actually alive? And then, she's going to a photographer to get these pictures taken, and it's suggested that he's a photographer that's always going to try and get his model to take their clothes off and do sexy photos. Go to Joe to Photo. And there's this scene where you're seeing her have the pictures taken, and then it cuts to her in the bathroom, crying and saying that she's not going to do it. She won't have these photos done. and somebody knocking on the door and being like, hey, your photo shoot needs to kind of start now. And then it cuts to seeing the magazines out and Mamania, ripping up one of these magazines where, she's topless.
Yeah.
And
Trying to buy them all too. Just being like, I'm going to protect her from this. This isn't what she should be doing. He like buys every magazine at the magazine stand with her in it.
So then, presumably she must have gone through with the photo shoot, but there's this great moment where you're not sure what's going on. You don't know if she dreamt about having that photo shoot, and then when it came to it, she was kind of having like flashbacks of this like rape scene and was like, I don't want to do this, and then didn't do it. But then it's like, oh wait, no, she did end up doing it. And again, it kind of pushes home that like coercion thing, that sort of consent issue that she didn't want this, but she did do it.
Yeah, and throughout the photography scene, we get the warning from the two girls from Cham that are like, hey, this is the photographer. He's always going to try and get you to get naked. And then one of them is just like, who cares? Mima doesn't care. She wants to show it off to the world or whatever. And then when you see the scene happening, she's wearing like a white cami and some underwear or whatever. And then you see the photographer goes, all right, let's take off that top. And then you just see it get more and more naked. And then, we see the pictures where she's just completely fully naked, and you see like, it's like Playboy-ish type stuff where she got like a bush and everything and her boobs are out, and she just keeps going down like these paths that, her agents didn't want her to go down, and maybe it's just something that she thinks she needs to do in order to prove that she's mature because she's shedding her pop idol thing. But I mean, you can be a serious actor or an actress or without doing all of that. I mean, there's been several people that have made that transition, but it's got to be rough.
I think that there can be this time of insecurity where you feel like you have to try really hard to show that you're not what people think you are when you're trying to kind of rebrand or change your image. And then people kind of mellow out and they go like, okay, people know that I'm not that anymore. With everybody who shows up dead around Mima, the increasing body count that starts to show up around her, most of them have their eyes gouged out, which I think, again, all about the gaze.
Yeah.
All about who's looking at her. And I think one of the most disturbing scenes is definitely when Shibuya, the screenwriter, ends up dead.
Yeah.
Because he can like hear something, like it sounds like
it's the Cham song
it's in a closet or in coming out of a car, because he's in like a parking structure, and then it stops for a bit and then it comes back on, and when he goes to the elevator it opens and there's a boombox just like sitting on the floor, and he's like, that's weird. All you see is like boombox, and then it cuts to something else for a second, and then shows the elevator opening and his eyes gouged out, and he's like sitting or laying next to the boombox.
Yeah, he's just on the floor. There's blood, like his back was up against the wall, and then he just kind of slid down. There's blood dripping from the wall, and it's just like, wow. I mean, both of his eyes are gouged out, and it's just a horrifying looking visual to see. And whoever's doing the murders did not appreciate that rape scene that he decided to put in there.
No. And the more of this show, Double Bind, that we see, every line that's in it is significant to like the larger plot.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. So with all the confusion of the reality in this movie, we go from reality, we go to her dreaming things, we go to her, I guess, kind of imagining things. And then there's also the TV show, which seems to relate specifically to what's going on in her real life and in her dreams. And it just contributes so much to what the fuck is the reality of this thing, because her character in her show is like going crazy and she's assuming these double identities. And part of the horror of the movie is there's somebody going around pretending to be Mima and writing a blog about her. and we find out it's Rumi that's assumed this role of I'm the real Mima because I'm the pop star and this is what I should have been doing the whole time. And it is paralleled in the TV show, and then Mima gets confused as to like who the other actress is, and she starts calling her by her role name, her character name, and
Yeah,
she's like,
it's
"What are
very
you
clever.
doing?" Like, I'm Anne or whatever her name was. She's like, we're not filming right now."
And I think one of the misdirects of the film is to start to make you think that it might be her who is killing all these men. Again, female revenge story.
Yeah.
But with that psychological aspect of she doesn't remember doing it or doesn't know she's doing it, because she really starts to lose her grasp on reality. So it's not like she really has a good alibi for any of those events, and she 100% has the motive to do it. So upon first viewing, it's very easy to start to think that it might be her actually doing it. And like the first line that she has as part of the TV series is, "Excuse me, who are you?" And she keeps repeating it to herself. And they even call her out on it, being like, "You only have one line. Like, why are you so nervous? Why do you keep saying it
Chill.
over and over again?"
Hey, why don't you chill on that one line? We don't need 800 different reads of "Excuse me, who are you?"
But of course, that's very significant as far as like her kind of losing touch with her identity, or also trying to reimage and rebrand.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, there's this line that the doctor in the story is saying to her, which has to do with like illusions, don't become real. Illusions aren't, part of life. They don't, forget the exact wording,
Yeah.
but
Illusions can never become reality, I think it was.
something like that, or take on life.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then we also hear Rumi say that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scene where Rumi and Mima are having tea, and they have this conversation about like, "Oh, it feels like it's been so long since I've seen you," and so on and so forth. And it goes from the TV series to that scene to the TV series, and then seems to be back at that scene, and she's kind of having this like Groundhog Day situation. And you think that maybe it's just replaying the scene, or maybe something's going to be slightly different this time. But, when she says, "It's been so long since I've seen you," she's like, "What are you talking about? I was here yesterday."
We did this like yesterday.
So then it's doing this like, "Oh, this hasn't repeated. This is actually what happened." And there's maybe some suggestion that she might have been drugged,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Well, I also, stepping us outside of like the narrative of that scene, I think the animation in those scenes are great because the transitions in them are so confusing too, because she'll like lay her head down on a pillow in the TV thing, and then it'll like kind of pan and then whip up, and then she's with Rumi, and that works so well in terms of just being really fucking cool and imaginative, and then adding to the confusion of like, is she even sleeping? Like it feels like one of those things where you've been up for so long, you didn't get a whole night of sleep, and so you just don't know. You can't see straight. You don't know what's reality. You don't know who you're talking to or what was a dream. And
Yeah.
it's so masterful. Like, it's so great.
Yeah. And then as part of the TV series, of course, the psychologist is like, she's been doing these murders the whole time. She has this multiple personality disorder situation. And,
Ever since she's tried to transition from being a pop idol to a model to an actress. And you're like, oh, was the psychologist like an actual thing? And Mima was imagining it being a TV show. And then you hear like, cut. You're like,
yeah. And you're like, no. I thought I figured it out for a second. Yeah. And then after that scene, you have this moment where she's locked in with Mamania, who reenacts this rape scene in the exact same location. Or it's an attempted rape. And then, she has some badass moments of, trying to get out of this. which is great for somebody who's seemed so vulnerable and so victimized throughout this time, for her just to be like fighting back.
Yeah.
If in the situation once it's actually real, and when we come back to that scene when she brings somebody back, I think it's Rumi that she takes back with her, and she's like, he was right here, and she's like, you must be crazy.
Yeah.
Just totally gaslighting her. And then we see, behind some curtains, we see the agent's been killed, eyes gouged out, and same with Mamania. So then you're like, oh shit, it's not Mamania that's been doing this the whole time, because he's become one of the victims now.
Yeah. And it's like there have been so many, who's doing all of this. So you have like, is Mima doing this? And she just has gone crazy, because at one point too, she has a dream about Shibuya getting murdered. And in the dream, the person that murdered him is wearing like this green jumpsuit and a red hat. And then the green jumpsuit and the red hat show up in her closet. And she's like, oh, what the fuck? What is this doing in here?
Covered in blood.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I dreamt this. Maybe I didn't dream this. Maybe I did this. And then, so that's gaslighting number one. Like,
and the suspense just after that, like the scary moment of having her doorbell ring, and she has this like start, like, oh my God. But then she actually goes, and it's like paparazzi, and they're trying to get into her place. But you have this sort of dramatic irony, knowing that there's these bloody clothes in her closet that these reporters and paparazzi could find. And then it would very much seem like she was the one who was, committing these murders. And again, it doesn't go into that. It doesn't focus on it. It doesn't make her, say to herself in a corner, like, oh my God, what if they find it? And what if they think I did it? It's just these like little subtle things that just ramp up the stakes and ramp up the suspense.
yeah. And then when you have the scene with Mania attacking her, which weird voice acting choice for the dub
Yeah, because
of
we
this.
don't hear his voice until that moment.
Until that moment, you don't hear his voice, and then he's like, "Hi, I'm here to attack you." It's just like, this guy was such a physically imposing, crazy looking person, and then I would have assumed that he would have had a much deeper voice or something, but then he has this like really high pitched, squeaky, odd voice. But then, all of the murders that have happened before, they've had their eyes gouged out, which, you have to use a certain weapon to do that. Like, you can't use like a gun to gouge somebody's eye out,
Watch me.
Yeah. But then I think that
At
Mamania
least a paring knife,
Yeah, well, he's like got a knife or like a
I
ice
think it's
pick.
an ice pick.
Yeah, so that has kind of been the weapon of choice of the people that have been murdered. And so when Mima attacks Mamania back, she uses like a hammer. She just like hammers him right in the head, and it knocks him out. So I feel like that's the kind of big hint that she's not the one that's been doing the murders. And then when you see Mamania and the agent dead together and the eyes have been gouged out, it's like, okay, so it's not Mima doing this, because it doesn't add up. But, with her hitting the dude in the head with the hammer, now there is kind of blood on her hands, and she could be gaslit into being like, you did this, but then she's gaslit into being like, this never even happened and you're crazy.
Yeah.
Poor Mima, dude.
And then Mima wakes up and she's like, wait, this is my room, but it's not my room. Because it turns out Rumi has a perfect replica of Mima's room as her own room.
And that's creepy. And it's Mima's room. The tipping point, or the tip off that it's not her room, is the Cham poster still up, all the Cham merch is still around, and Mima's looking around like, I took this down. What's going on? All the fish are still alive, and she's like, what's happening here? This is not where I live. And it just adds to that confusion. It adds to the where am I, what's reality type of deal. And then,
this is like the big reveal when we see that Rumi has been this sort of fake fake Mima this whole time.
Even though she's claiming to be the real Mima.
Yes. And there's some confusion about how Mima starts to see the fake Mima in the mirror saying things to her, or she tries to chase her down a hallway. And we don't totally know which of these times was actually Rumi, speaking to her the way she is in this sort of mustache twirling scene, as David Fagiani would say. Yeah, so there's a little bit of confusion about what's just the unraveling mental health of this girl going through so much, and what is Rumi kind of tormenting her or having her own delusions about, still being a pop idol and maybe being Mima or being the real Mima, truer to Mima than Mima is anymore.
Yeah, and I'm sure that with Rumi introducing all of that self-doubt into Mima's life, when she's talking to herself in the mirror and it's her reflection in the pop idol, that's just in her head of like, you shouldn't be trained to be an actress. You should still keep being a pop idol. So I think a lot of the words that Rumi was putting into her head really settled in there. But then we see Rumi kind of take the physical form of Mima, where she just kind of dresses up as her and has a wig and is like, I'm the real Mima. That's when you start to be like, whoa, this bitch is crazy, dude.
And then starts attacking her with an ice pick.
With an ice pick, yeah.
Yeah.
Naturally. But then they have like this weird foot chase through the city. And
can I mention something interesting about this before we get into the foot chase? I find it super interesting that, this is this like Scooby-Doo moment where they take the mask off of the ghost and they're like, it was the landlord the whole time.
Yeah.
And that kind of ends the story, or things kind of de-escalate from there. And that is not what happens in this situation. It's like it's not revealing the truth, or the identity of the person who's been actually causing these murders, etc. That is not what solves the problem, because there is still these like deep-seated, emotional and mental health issues that this girl still has. So kind of revealing the ghost doesn't actually fix the problem.
Yeah, and even when she is revealed, Rumi still believes that she's still the real Mima, and she's still gaslighting and telling Mima that what she's doing is wrong, and she actually has her best interests at heart, and she's fucking up by trying to be an actress. And then there's like I was about to say, there's this weird foot chase through the city where, we see Mima really struggling she's been stabbed with the ice pick in the chest, but she's really struggling to get away from Rumi. But Rumi is like able to float and fly, and we see her as quote unquote real Mima, just floating and effortlessly running and catching up to Mima. But then there's also a reflection scene where she's running or floating as real Mima, but you see in the reflection that it's Rumi, and she's hustling and sweating, just like like really having a rough time trying to get
Jowls
her.
swinging.
Yeah, but I don't know. She like jumped from building to building, and how did you do that?
Yeah, some of that is very unclear.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I get that, she thinks that she's Mima and she's this perfect idol sensation, but I don't think she could jump from a building to building without, hurting herself.
Yeah, and upon this viewing, just because of the fact that we hear Mima screaming for help, and there are like lights on in windows and things, nobody comes to help. Nobody even comes to like look. And I just was thinking, like, with that much commotion, I feel like people would be looking out their windows or coming out of a shop, even enough to just be like, oh shit, what's going on? Oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Not even that. And I was like, maybe this isn't actually happening.
Yeah.
And I was kind of getting into my head, about that. Again, essay for every scene. But, we get to this moment where there's all of this broken mirror, which of course with the reflection motif is very meaningful here. And then we have Rumi just fall onto broken mirror.
Which is just the silliest death. Like, I don't know.
Well, she doesn't even die.
Well, yeah, I don't know what happens to her that she's forced to do that, but she just kind of slowly walks over to the broken, jagged mirror that's sticking up and just kind of.
Oh, it's because she had the wig removed.
Oh, yeah.
Which
and
kind of
her reality is broken. Or
her reality
fantasy.
is broken. Her identity is kind of shattered. And then she goes over and impales herself on this broken shard of mirror. And then there are these shards of mirror on the floor and you see her reflection and it's disjointed. And I was just like, oh, what a shot.
Yeah.
It's so good. I mean, disjointed like the editing and the timeline and the nonlinear nature of the whole film. And it's also the shattering of her own identity and her worldview and Mima's, and it's just like, ugh.
Yeah, and then she gets up from the jagged glass that she impaled herself with, and she's just like, you know what? This is the end of the real Mima. I get it. I'm washed up old Rumi. I'm just going to go walk out in front of a truck. And then she walks out in front of the truck and kind of does like this grand, like, this is my finale.
Martyrdom.
Yeah, and, we see the truck kind of take the form of a clapping audience, like this is her final performance as the real Mima.
Yeah, headlights are like the bright lights on the stage.
And then Mima saves her because she's like, I don't want to see you get hit by a truck. It's like, well, why would you do that? Like, just, But she saves her, and then, she's committed to a mental institution. And even at the mental institution, Rumi still has a hard time breaking away from her I'm the real Mima situation, and Mima comes to visit her for some reason. Why would you ever do that?
Yeah, she seems to be doing the loving the mentally ill person you care about from afar, where she's not making herself known, she's not spending time with the person, but she is giving her flowers.
Yeah.
And maybe, who knows, maybe even paying for her to be in this asylum. You get the impression that she has her shit together. The only time you really see Mima unaccompanied is really when she's in her room. And everywhere else, Rumi's with her, or she's got her
The agent driving her.
Yeah, or before she was in a trio band and was always with that trio. But now she looks like clean and put together, and she's unaccompanied. She's on her own, and as she's walking out of this asylum, there are these girls who are like, oh my God, is that like the real Mima? First time besides like Rumi that we see the women's gaze of, wondering who she is, or potentially some of her fans. And, she gets into the car and she's like, I'm the real Mima.
Yeah, that was so. Well, I remember the first time we watched it, you were confused because I think that you brought up, like, was that the real Mima or was that Rumi escaping? Because the two.
I forgot that I'd said that.
I think it's the two. I think they're nurses that are like, is that really Mima? Why would she be here? What is she doing here? And then she gets into the car and she looks into the mirror. Nope, I'm doing just fine. I'm walking on sunshine, which is like, that's the last thing that we see in the movie, and it's just really bizarre.
I think
it's like, there is a happy ending.
I can see why past me might have thought that.
Yeah.
I also think that it's very telling that when Rumi is holding the flowers, she looks at her reflection, and she's seeing
still the real Mima.
The real Mima. So, I mean, my interpretation now is definitely different. I just think that last line is delivered badly.
Oh, it's bad.
No, I'm the real thing.
It's so stupid.
It sounds like it is trying to cast doubt on whether she is the real one, which I don't think is what it's supposed to be doing. But then
I feel the opposite. I think it's literally to be like, nope. This is a happy ending.
I think that is the purpose of it.
Oh, and I hate that.
But I don't think it needs to be done that way. I feel like it's so over the top and hammy the way
Yeah.
it's done that it sounds like it's almost trying to cast doubt on it. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I know exactly what you're talking about. It is very hammed up, just like, I'm the real Mima.
No, I'm the real thing.
Like if she would have just like looked at the mirror and just kind of was like, no, I'm the real Mima. Like I feel like that would have been better.
Yeah.
Or even maybe just look in the mirror and, you know, I don't think that there needs to be that line of like, no, I've taken control of this. Like,
Or if she'd said it to the women.
signed an autograph.
Sure.
I don't know.
Anything, you know, but then maybe it's because she's taking back her identity. And if she's doing that, then she's pandering to fans. And maybe that's why, I don't know. But I'd read somewhere that apparently in that last scene, there's no reflection in her sunglasses.
Is that supposed to cast out?
And that's something significant, or that, you know, you don't have this double vision anymore of seeing. I don't know. I'd have to actually look at it too to decide if that was true. Because she's looking in the mirror, isn't she?
Yeah. She's looking in the rear view
Like
mirror.
the mirror of the car.
Yeah.
So that is still a reflection.
Yeah.
No, I'm the real thing.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that last line could have been delivered better, but I'm not going to squabble with it. Like the whole rest of the movie is so good. Like the reading of one line at the end, but it is a really important line. And
It's really important.
It just kind of is so weird.
What did you think about the voice acting besides Mamania?
Yeah, everything else was fine. Yeah, it wasn't too over the top. I mean, Mamania's voice is just so awful. Like it's so bad. I think that Steve Bloom is in this, the guy from Cowboy Bebop, Spike Spiegel, and Samurai Champloo. But he's just one of the like side characters, I think, and it might not even be him. But everybody else is real, and you know, Mima can get kind of whiny at times, but that's what her character is. She's like a lost, naive little person.
I didn't always love her voice. I thought that sometimes, like, some of the crying, I felt like it didn't work. I thought it felt
specifically when the fish are dead.
Yeah, and it felt fake.
Yeah.
Bridget Hoffman is the voice actress, although she goes by a pseudonym, which just changes her last name. I forget what she changes her last name to, but she has been in a ton of anime things, a lot of anime movies and some anime series. She was in Fate Zero.
Yeah, one of our favorite anime series.
Played the homunculus.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And I mean, I think this is one of those films that gets the voice acting seal of approval from Joe Welke, not having any celebrities in it.
Yeah.
Having true voice actors.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even, aside from Steve Bloom, and I don't even know if that's him, I don't recognize anybody. Like sometimes anime movies, I'll break off into like, what is that voice? I've heard that voice. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's Josuke from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and then I'll look it up and be like, oh, he voiced Eren in Attack on Titan, and this didn't really have that. Like I know that Brittany Hoffman or whatever her name is voiced several other people in anime, but it didn't distract me, and I couldn't really place it or anything. But yeah, I mean, the voice acting is great aside from Mamania, like, and then that last line, but Mamania is just so bad. It really, I forgot how bad it was until he started talking, and I was like, oh yeah, this is so terrible. And then we discussed at length that last line. I feel like it could have been read a little better, but otherwise, I think it's pretty good voice acting.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. All righty.
I got distracted for a second because I was just thinking about just how cool it is the way that Satoshi Kon writes female characters and the way he writes them into his films, because you're familiar with the Bechdel test, right? This film passes the Bechdel test with flying colors, and I think that all of Satoshi Kon's films would. And he apparently has said that he prefers writing female characters because he doesn't really know how they think. he's like, I know how men think, but with women, I don't, and I feel like I can put more of my story into them.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is a really weird way of thinking of it, because you think like, oh, if I know the psyche better, then I can write the character more.
They always say like, write what you know, and he's like, nah, fuck that. I'm gonna write what I have no idea.
He's almost like,
about.
no, if I knew what they would think, then it would be distracting. I'd have to write that. But if I don't know, then I can actually be more creative about what I do here. But there's something about this film that has a very strong like feminist presence in a weird way. Because, ultimately, is she empowered? Maybe. The ending seems to suggest that Mima is empowered by the end of this film. But I just think what's so interesting about it is, it seems to be all about the male gaze and male desire and how that's shaping who she is and taking away agency from her. But it's just becomes so subverted because the most important and most dangerous gaze in this film becomes Rumi's gaze, which is the female gaze. And then this sort of female revenge fantasy that gets completely out of control. And I think that that's just such a fascinating plot and so much ahead of its time.
Well, it's also, so much of it is about the male gaze and men manipulating everything about it. But then it turns out that the master manipulator is Rumi, who is a woman, and she's even manipulating men. Like she manipulated Mamania into like doing her bidding. And we even see a scene where she's like leaning over him and like whispering in his ear, and she's tricking him with her emails and everything. So it subverts the, obviously there are things in there where the screenwriter's like, let's see how far she'll go for this acting dream that she's got. And he's like, let's throw in a rape scene out of fucking nowhere. And it doesn't seem to really add much to the story, but it seemed like a little knife twist. And then, he gets knife twisted.
Yeah, like it never explicitly says that men are controlling her life or that men control, the entertainment industry, but it has those little clues that's suggesting like that is the case.
Well, it's also like Rumi's being like, oh, you think you control her life? I control her life, and I'm going to kill you. It's like, damn, dude. No. You don't control her life. I do. Stabby stab. No more eyeballs for you.
Yeah, and that just the level of significance with the puncturing out the eyeballs too.
Yeah, that's brutal. It's like, I feel like some of those she did that after the fact, with Mamania, when he gets slammed in the head with a hammer, he's out. I think that he's like pretty well taken care of. And she's like, no, let's go this extra step. He doesn't need eyeballs anymore.
So then he's now seen her in that way, and it's kind of like, well, you're not useful anymore, and now your eyes have done the male gaze that I have this revenge fantasy about, and so I'm going to gouge your eyes out.
Yeah, it's also kind of like a revenge fantasy or a revenge story for Rumi too, where she's like, you're fucking over my dream, so I'm gonna ruin your life. And then Mima's like, no, I'm gonna revenge on you. Double revenge. Double bind. Double revenge on you. Uno reverse card. Revenge on you.
So how is Mima having revenge against Rumi?
Because she is killing everyone. It's like she killed her agent. She killed the screenwriter.
No, but how is she getting revenge? Mima revenge on Rumi.
Yeah. Because she sends her to a mental institution and she gets to like live her own life and make her own decisions.
I don't think that's revenge.
That's revenge.
How?
They say that the best revenge is living your best life. That's how you really do revenge on someone that you don't like, your ex or something.
Right. The metaphorical sense.
Yeah, it's like the best revenge that you can do is live a good life or successful life. So
The best offense is a good defense.
I mean, in the end, Mima is not in a mental institution, so she got her way and Rumi did not. So that's pretty sweet revenge.
All right. I guess I'll buy it.
You better.
I feel coerced.
We haven't been recording a podcast, Kat.
God, I am
This
recording.
is a whole
Right?
dream.
I wake up. Fuck. What day is it? I don't know what's going on anymore.
Am I a pop star? Am I a pop idol? Is there anything else you want to bring up before we get to cranking these amps?
I would like to say that if you want to read more about this, that there is a great essay called "Excuse Me, Who Are You?
Oh.
Performance, the Gaze, and the Female in the Works of Kon Satoshi" by Susan Napier. It is a fantastic article. There's a lot of things that I talked about that I read in here. So I wanted to backwards credit some of that information about
Little hat tip.
the gaze. Yeah, a little hat tip to good old Susan. Good old Suze, best in the biz.
Also 82 minutes long.
Yeah.
So really a breezy movie.
And it doesn't feel that short, but in a good way. Like there's so much going on that it feels like a movie with a lot of substance.
Well, it distorts reality. So you're like, I don't even know what time is anymore. So
It does more in 82 minutes than a lot of movies do in 2 hours.
great way to put that. All right, let's crank those amps. You go first.
11.
Oh, yeah, 11. Yeah.
Yeah.
11 out of 11.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so good. I think this is a great, like, if someone is hesitant about watching anime movies for some reason, like my one buddy, I was trying to get him to watch this movie because he's like, I've never seen anime. I think anime's lame or whatever. And I was like, you should see Perfect Blue. I think this is a great movie for someone that's like, oh, anime, isn't that all just, Pokemon and Digimon and Sailor Moon? It's like, you should see this movie because it's so good, number one. And number two, it is an anime. I think that this is the best anime to like recommend to someone that's trying to get into it if they're skeptical.
I love it. I think it's a thinking piece. It's a heady piece, but I think there's plenty of people that this would, number one, go over their head, and number two, be confusing and cause unease to the extent that's not actually helping them enjoy the film. So I think that if you know somebody who also just enjoys psychological thrillers or nonlinear story, that this is 100% a great entry point into anime if they're not anime fans. Great film for a cinephile who hasn't watched a lot of anime. But I wouldn't call this film just broadly an entry point. I think
No. I was saying like it's a good entry point for people that think that anime is dumb or like it's like, oh, it's just Pokemon and Sailor Moon. If they're like, oh, that's all it is. Like, no, I think it's a good entry point for those people to be like, no, you should see this because it's not all just that. But I think it has more broad appeal than you do, I think. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm giving it an 11. And it's partly because of being a cinephile myself. I think that Satoshi Kon's nonlinear approach really reflects his larger idea about life. And I think that he put those ideas into all of his films in a very different way every time. You get some directors who are kind of saying the same thing again, but it's not so varied that each film stands apart the way the films of Satoshi Kon do. And, dying at such a young age, he didn't have a lot of time to be as prolific as some other anime directors. And I think it's a really awful shame that we didn't get to see more of his work. But when you see the kind of people that he's influenced, Christopher Nolan says that he took a lot of his inspiration for Inception from Paprika. And as you were talking about some of the inspiration that went into Black Swan, although I've read some places where he's like, I wasn't influenced by it. Weren't you?
It's like, bro, you bought an entire scene from Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
Like, we know you've seen it.
And it's just amazing with how few works he was able to put out, what a humongous influence he was, and the boundaries that he was breaking is just really, really kind of revolutionary.
Well, I find it interesting that, he has had such an impact and influence on a lot of live action directors. Like, we don't see a lot of anime movies like this going on these days. We just did a podcast about Belle, which, isn't like this really at all. Like, a lot of the anime movies that have been coming out recently, like Your Name and Weathering with You, are all kind of like love story, twee, teenager things, and it's less mature content going on. So it's interesting to see that he's had such an impact on live action filmmaking and reality bending in live action filmmaking, and nobody's really like taken the baton from him in anime, which kind of sucks, I think.
And I was reading his obituary that was published in The Guardian, and there's a little note at the end of the obituary that, has this like very hopeful note about like he was in the process of making this film called Dream Machine, and it was going to be a departure from some of his other films because it was going to be more of a for kids and grown-ups kind of thing, and it's going to be continue to be made by Madhouse, who we worked with a lot. And it's just so interesting that time there was this idea that it was definitely being made and it was going to be carried on, and over time they were like, we can't do this.
They're like, there's no one that's going to be able to carry on this idea.
Yeah.
Like they searched long and hard for a director or somebody to like finish it up, and they decided like, you know what, this might be better left undone because we're not going to do it justice. We don't want to besmirch the good name of Satoshi Kon.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you for listening, everybody. This has been our episode on Perfect Blue. Please follow us on Instagram at the Anime Movie Podcast. Subscribe on all of the podcast channels, and we also have a YouTube channel where, if you're watching this, you obviously know that. And we post clips there. Subscribe to that. Give us a like and a thumbs up on everything. Email in at theanimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. And that's about it. That'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Just wink at the camera.
I think I did.
Just give a little wink. You flirting with the A74?
I did give a wink to the camera, and I didn't even it was just a body response.
Thanks for listening to the Anime Movie Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at the Anime Movie Podcast, and you can reach out via email at theanimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell a friend. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.